First time I've actually done a presentation in front of an audience in 2.5 years, and I'm gonna go with it even though we're blue. So, this is a funny little journey. This isn't about funded research. This is a funny little project that I started about 3 years ago off the side of my desk. And it's taken me on all kinds of different journeys and places. I've been calling it an evolving research prototype. So back in the before times, right before the pandemic, we announced the launch of POP, Public, Open, Participatory, which we were calling a post-digital journal of the public humanities. And that came out of the context of the Implementing New Knowledge Environments Research Network, which is a big partnership grant research network that's centered around digital humanities and open social scholarship and public scholarship in the humanities, centered at University of Victoria, but with participants all the way across Canada, including a bunch of stuff here at SFU. It's a big interdisciplinary group, very friendly, humanities-oriented community. It meets once a year. And there was a need for a journal, and I thought, well, let's start a journal. You know, what if we started a journal that was really made around readership rather than thinking about indexing and metrics and scaling up and that sort of thing? And so the conjecture, the original kind of research prototype idea was what if we printed it? And I don't mean like printing like those nasty little 6x9 journals that, you know, you all remember and we've mostly put in the past, but are still on the shelves of the library. What if we made something that was actually beautiful? Here's where the blue projector is really going to fail me, because this is actually gorgeous in actual print because it's pink and yellow and orange. Some lovely work by my colleague Mauve Paget, who was here earlier but had to run. The idea of doing it in print as a post-digital kind of gesture that would be lovely and would make you want to read it and want to engage with it and want to collect it even. That kind of an idea. Of course, it would also be online and open access and have DOIs and all of that good stuff as well. But the idea of being able to do it in print and to be able to hand circulate it. And the neat idea was, we thought we would circulate it at conferences and events, and we were going to launch at the Digital Humanities Summer Institute in June at UVic in 2020. You can see where this is going, right? So that's like what DHSI looks like. It's like 1,000 or 1,500 people for a week, and we thought if we had these beautiful journals, people would be interested in them as physical objects. You could hand sell them, you could gift them to people, people could pick them up and love them and take them home and collect them. This is a whole different way of doing humanities scholarship. And as all magazine publishers know, print circulation exceeds your print run because print copies get left places and handed to people and put on coffee tables and left on bus stops. And so we thought there's an excellent opportunity here for public scholarship, right? That you could actually have something that goes to academics but maybe exceeds that grasp. Anyway, you know what happened, right? The pandemic happened and conferences started to look like this. Maybe not quite so blue. We were all blue inside though, right? So that squashed all the live events and that squashed our circulation plan. So this thing ended up being an online open access journal like all the other online open access journals out there, which isn't that interesting, except that I started to think about it as a different kind of a research prototype. So we made POP, and we, again with the help of Mauve Paget, some lovely design and typography and that sort of thing, and I started to think about it as a minimum viable product. What's the MVP for a journal? What's the bare minimum, the core, the essence of what you need to make a journal? You know, things like an editorial board, professional copy editing, good typography, metadata, digital object identifiers, closed peer review, and we thought an ethic of care in our relations with authors and an ethic of care with our relationship with our readers too was a big piece of that. So as just an online journal, POP starts to become this different thing, and I built it completely out of like simplest possible technology. All the content is Markdown, it deploys through GitHub, there's a static site generator, it's all built on kind of almost disposable components to minimize the idea of any kind of dependency on one platform or another. to get to a kind of simplest possible editorial and production workflow as well, like just the simplest possible kind of thing. And that was, I think, really, really successful. And we produced the first issue on like almost no money at all, and it looked like this was going to go forward. And so I started to think about other things. And then as we got into a second issue and a third issue, we started to think about the peer review process. And I thought, okay, here's another opportunity for this thing to be a research prototype. What do we do with the peer review? What do we want peer review to do for us? This is a humanities journal, interdisciplinary. It's got a friendly Canadian, Australian, more or less, audience. How do we turn that into something that's specific to that audience and its needs? How do we make peer review work in a generative way for this kind of an audience? And I started to think about that, and I went back and read about care ethics. And I was thinking about care ethics as that relates to the editorial profession, and about editorial work in general, and about a refocusing on relationality between editors and reviewers. And that was a really interesting place to kind of go, and we bumped up against a whole bunch of walls, because what turns out to be the case is, if it's a scholarly journal with a capital S and a capital E, you have all been trained for way too many years to write in a particular way for a scholarly journal, and you've all been trained for way too many years to review in a particular way for a scholarly journal. So even though you can have all kinds of wonderful care-based generative ideas about how to refigure peer review, it's damn hard to pull off in practice, because we all know what to do with peer review. There was one interesting alternative, and this is a blue picture. But this was from the before times. This was actually an editing bee, a peer reviewing bee for the proceedings of an Inc. conference. I think this is 2018, that we did in a backyard with food, where we paired up the reviewers and gave everybody, here's your anonymous submission, and we sat with like barbecue on a bench in a backyard and talked about the article and wrote the reviews of it. And that was like the best peer reviewing experience ever, because everybody was in this really kind of generous frame of mind, and it was nice to think about how to nurture these papers and where this was going, and where this research could go next. And we wrote these long, voluminous, beautiful reviews. And then the experience of doing the peer reviews on those meetings during the pandemic, and one reviewer said, this feels a lot more like grading term papers. So that was interesting. Anyway, so I mean, there's a whole bunch of interesting social and cultural context around how we do that kind of stuff. The scholarly journal might not be the only way to do that. And so where we're at now, looking at a fourth issue and going forward, is this thing that's being launched, the Canadian HSS Commons, Humanities and Social Sciences Commons, which I spent actually all day today at Congress in the Zoom window, hearing more and more about. HSS Commons is patterned after the successful MLA Commons and the Humanities Commons projects in the United States, which were sort of pitched as disciplinary specific alternatives to things like ResearchGate or academia.edu. But they become publication venues and hosts for scholarly discourse of their own. And so the Canadian HSS Commons is sort of, it's just embryonic, it's just sort of emerging right now as an idea to be able to do that in a Canadian context, and to do it even more open and even more flexible than the MLA and Humanities Commons. For instance, you don't have to pay to be a member of the MLA to be part of this. So what I'm really interested in doing with the next phase of POP as the next kind of research prototype is as an overlay journal on top of things that are born native onto the commons. So the idea of an overlay journal comes from the sciences and the rise of preprint servers. And it's the idea that a journal could be nothing more than a curated, reviewed, and credentialed set of things pulled from a repository where things have already been published. So effectively the disaggregation of the reviewing and credentialing part of a journal from the publication distribution part of it. And I'm thinking there's an opportunity here, especially in the goals of the Canadian HSS Commons, which is all about open and public scholarship, to break out of that hidebound, I use the term advisedly, journal thinking, right? Where we're a journal and its peer review mechanisms are very often about exclusivity, right? They're about policing the norms of a scholarly society. There's a lot of that kind of baggage. If we break out of the journal specifically into a commons that is designed explicitly with some kind of public access in mind, and then we can do curation and filtering and review and credentialing of articles on top of that, that maybe there's another kind of an opportunity there, as just an alternative way of thinking about open scholarship in the humanities. So that's like 4 different pivots within 2.5 years, basically, with POP, which I think is possible because it's been this sort of MVP thing. It's agile, it's small, very inspired by this group of people that run the Scholar-Led Consortium in the US and the UK, which is about scaling small and keeping scholarly publications as the means of production owned within the university. Public Knowledge Project obviously has similar kinds of goals and aesthetics, but the scaling small part of it so that we can try to run these things out of our departments and be agile about where they need to go. So look for POP in an unexpected place, whether it's a bus stop or on some commons repository or something like that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John.